Only 32% of U.S. households prepare a monthly budget or a spending plan of any sort. 32%, 1/3 of Americans. The reason I put that up there is because years ago I read a book called The Millionaire Next Door. Author Thomas Stanley, highly recommend it to all of you. And in that book, I was looking, and they were talking about just people like you and me, everyday people, neighbors, who are millionaires. And it was their stories in this book, how they became millionaires. So I was fascinated as a young financial planner at the time to try to find a common denominator, if any, between these folks, to see if I could see a pattern. Well, there was one pattern. Guess what it was? Yeah, they all budgeted. Every one of them. They did many other things different, but that was the one common denominator. The average credit card debt in the United States of Americans, $5,700. The average. Some are much higher, some much lower. Any idea what the average, national average interest rate is on credit cards? Interest rate? 16.7% average interest rate across the United States. Over 40% of Americans have less than $10,000 when they retire. 4 out of 10 Americans retire with $10,000 or less. In other words, they're broke. This class is called the 10 Baby Steps to Financial Freedom. I teach this class because over the years as a financial advisor, I have seen people make a lot of mistakes, including myself. I teach this class to try my level best to help you avoid some of the mistakes that most of us older folks have made. Certainly that I've seen in my client base over the years. I've been doing this a long time because I'm an older guy. Been doing this about 40 years, teaching financial planning and, of course, financial planning practice. I want to tell you up front, if I can't answer, I don't know any of you in here. I do know one person, but most of the people I don't know in here. I'm going to assume, because I don't know you, that you know nothing. Fully realizing you know a lot. But because I don't know where you're coming from, please forgive me if some of this was a little basic. But I promise you, even if you are very knowledgeable, you're going to pick up some good stuff tonight. So let's start with step number 1. These 10 baby steps, by the way, have been put together. It's really a combination of Dave Ramsey and the Crown Ministries. I've taken the best of both of them, tried to condense it down into 1 hour. The church asked me to do that many years ago when the services were reduced down to 1 hour. We used to have services of an hour and a half, which was long enough to do a Crown Ministries class. When it was reduced down to 1 hour, we could no longer do an hour and a half class. So they asked me to condense it down to 1 hour, and that's the result, this particular class. Okay, these 10 steps are designed, it's called 10 Baby Steps to Financial Freedom. Let me define financial freedom from my standpoint. It means freedom from worry, from financial worry. Doesn't mean you're rich, just free from worry. Most Americans worry a lot about their finances. So these steps are designed to help you just stop worrying so much. So first, create a spending plan. Now, we're going to talk about several different ways to create a spending plan. I like to tell people it's better to tell your money where to go than wonder where it went. So that's what a spending plan is all about. You determine where the money that you earn, hard-earned money, goes, rather than wondering where in the world it went. I'm going to give you several different ways of preparing the plan. Most of you are aware of the typical chore of preparing a budget if you've ever tried to do one. Most people give up, they don't follow it, because it's a real chore. However, if you're interested in setting up a budget, item by item, I suggest you go to one of those websites that you see on the screen. They can help you put together that budget. But I'm going to give you two other ways of setting up a spending plan that doesn't require itemization. One of them is called the 50-30-20 plan. How many of you heard of that before? Any of you? Well, good. I can teach you something. And the other is the 80-20 plan. So how does the 50-30-20 plan work? So I've made a few notes here, and I'm going to actually read these few notes on this particular plan, because I think this would work for most of you. And when I read it, you're going to say, we can't do that. Well, this should be a goal. The 50-30-20 plan I'm going to tell you about should be an objective, a goal, to help you determine where your money is going and whether or not you want it to go there. So, the 50%. You set aside 50% of the money you earn, your take-home pay, for basic living expenses. Things that are necessary for survival, right? Things like rent, mortgages, bills, health care, groceries, car payments, transportation, and so on. The basic core expenses. The goal should be that no more than 50% of your take-home pay goes to those core basic expenses. Right now, and obviously you don't know at this point probably what percentage of your pay. You may say, well, 100% of mine goes to that. The goal is to somehow, some way reduce your expenses or increase your income somehow, some way to ultimately get to 50% of your paycheck is going for your core basic expenses. So it starts there. So spending more than 50% of your salary on your needs, if you are, it says, I wrote, if it's possible to downsize your lifestyle by moving to a smaller house, switching to a more modest car, and so on. If not, you'll need to cut down in either categories until your needs decrease. Having given this class so many times, I've had people take drastic steps to reduce, to get to this 50% level for their core expenses. I've had them downsize their house. I've had them sell the expensive car. I've had them do massive yard sales to raise extra income. People have come up to me over the years and said, I've really gotten creative. Listen, let me tell you how I've got it down to 50%, and they'll tell me their story. It's really neat. So I'm challenging you, unless you want to go through the itemization budget through one of these websites, consider this 50-30. So it starts with the 50%. What's the 30% for? Put 30% of your money towards personal expenses or wants. So the first one is needs, right? 50% is your needs. Now we're going to be talking about your wants. It's a little more fun. So things you want but don't necessarily need is the 30%. These include dining out, traveling, buying clothes, the latest electronic gadgets, leisure activities, parties, and so on. The good stuff. In other words, all those extras that make life a little more entertaining and enjoyable. Traditional budgets often frown upon items in this category. eating out, a taxi to the airport, a new outfit, and these are the easiest expenses to cut if you're running over 30%. But work is only worth the life, these are things I wrote down at my editorial. But work is only worth the life that it helps you create. Treating yourself responsibly will help you stick with your goals long term. So we got 50% for your needs, 30% for the fun stuff, for the wants, right? What's the 20% for? Savings. Dedicate 20% of your money to saving for the future. So $2 out of every 10. This money is a safety net that will prepare and protect you for the future, whatever it may hold. From buying a house to losing your job, both expected and unexpected unexpected life events are made easier with savings. And while retirement may sound worlds away, your future self will thank you for starting now. I also made a note, if you have debts, you may first want to use money from this 20% to pay down your balances faster. We'll be talking about debt in a moment. Okay, so that's the 50, 30, 20. What I suggest if you're going to attempt this is spend the next 30 days going through your expenses and figure out how much you're spending in each of these three areas now. Well, Mike, 80%, I figured it out. 80% is going towards my basic expenses right now. So then you need to get creative. I can't do it for you. No one else can do it for you. The goal is to get it down to 50%. What do you need to do to do that? There's no easy, we said baby steps. These are going to be, they sound easy, but they're not easy. If they're easy, everyone would have done it. No one would be worrying. So it's not easy, but they work. They're proven to work. What's the 80-20 plan? This is the simplest. You're going to save 20% of your paycheck, and you spend the 80% any way you want. You can see what we're trying to do here is get you to put some money away. Okay, so that's step number 1 of the 10. Number 2, create a $1,000 reserve for emergencies. Did you know that 75% of Americans don't have $1,000 in the bank? 70% don't have $1,000 in the bank. So what happens when emergencies occur? They borrow it. And that's why the credit cards get so high. You already know that. So, step number 2, and you should be doing these in order, by the way. Start the budget first. Find out where your money's going. Start to get a handle on that. Now, if you don't have a reserve, if you do, then don't worry about it. Just wait for the next step. Okay, I've already told you, I'm assuming for now that you haven't done any of these steps, not knowing you. So you might say, well, Mike, I'm spending 100% of my paycheck right now on just to live. And yeah, I don't have $1,000, but how in the world am I going to get $1,000 saved when I can barely pay my bills? Well, I'm going to give you a couple tips. The first is going to be a challenge. It's called the 5-cent challenge, the nickel challenge. You up for a challenge? To save 1,000? Okay. Now this is going to sound unbelievable, but if you do the math, you'll see that it's true. Let's say you walk out of here and you're going to do this nickel challenge that this crazy guy Mike May told you to try. So what is it all about? Well, for each day you're going to start off by saving, you're going to get a piggy bank, and you're going to put a nickel in there the first day. The second day, you're going to put in an additional nickel, you're going to put in a dime. Each day for the next year, next 365, you're going to put an extra nickel in. So you're going to put 5 cents the first day, 10 cents the next day, 15 cents the next day, 20 cents the next day, 25 cents the next day, and so on for a year. Any idea how much you'd have saved at the end of that year if you were faithful to do that each and every day? Just adding an additional nickel to what you did before. 20 cents, 25 cents, now 30 cents, now 35 cents, now 40 cents, and so on for a year. 2 questions. How much do you think you would have saved, number one? Number two, what's the maximum amount you think you would have had to save in any one day in that year? Any guesses? I'd be surprised if you, but take a wild guess. Anybody? How much would you have saved? How much? Okay. Any other guesses? A lot more, you think? How much, you think? Take a stab. Now we're getting closer. Yeah. You would have saved $3,000, I got the exact number here, $339.75. So if you saved half that nickel, only 2.5 cents, you'd have half that amount. But I'm just trying to get you to the 1,000. But I bet you could save a nickel and then 10 cents. What's the most you'd have to save in, let's say, the last day of the year that you're doing this? What's that amount going to be for that one day? How much? $20. Close. Very good. Very good. It's actually just $18 in pennies. That's the most you would have had to save on the last day of the year. Well, I don't know obviously there are going to be some days we have to save $10, right, as you get closer. But I've had so many people tell me there's no way I can save $1,000 on my paycheck. And I've had them take this challenge and save $3,000. It's amazing. Because they had a goal, and it seemed so simple, so incremental. And if 18 is the most I have to save on the last day, I can do this. A couple other ways of saving that I've found really works for people. Let's say you wanted to save just $1,000 and you wanted to do it in the next 90 days. How much would you have to save per day in order to have $1,000 in 90 days? $11.12 a day for 90 days. You'd have $1,000. We got to get you to this $1,000. Why is it important that Dave Ramsey and Crown Ministries both say that you've got to have some money in the bank? Why? Yeah. To avoid having to go into debt when you have to when life happens. So we're going to start you small at $1,000. What are some other ways? Well, what if you wanted to save $1,000 in 30 days? That would be $33.34 a day for 30 days. Dave Ramsey would say you eat beans and rice for 30 days. Right? For those of you who know anything about Ramsey's course. So now let's assume you've done step one, either the 80-20 plan or the 50-30-20. You know where your money's going, or at least you're working towards getting it in balance. You've saved your $1,000. Now we're ready to go to step number 3. Now what we're going to do is get rid of any credit card debt you might have. Okay? The first recommendation I have would be to and you probably know about this, is to transfer any balances you have to I'm recommending a City Simplicity card. If you transfer the balances over to them, they'll give you 21 months with 0 interest. So right now you might be paying 8, 10, 12, 16% interest on your credit cards. You transfer it over to them. You simply call them and ask them how to do that, and they'll tell you how to do it. You transfer all your balances over to City Simplicity. You can Google it and find out. That's what I did to find out what the best rate was out there, credit card rate. So 0% for 21 months. And then what you want to try to do is to try to get rid of that, as much of that credit card debt as you can within how much time? 21 months. Pardon? 21 months. 21 months. So that's almost 2 years, right? Yeah. You almost have 2 years to pay off that debt. Now, if you can't, at least you've obviously saved some interest. So that's the first thing I'd recommend that you consider. Pay off your highest interest rate cards first, double your minimum payment. These are just other ways people are using to get rid of debt. Apply any extra money in your budget to your payment. Split your payment in half and pay twice. So the main thing is, I'm asking you to consider, you're in this class, you're taking time to come in here. So obviously you're serious, or somewhat serious at least, to try to get your financial house in order, right? You wouldn't be here. I'm telling you that the cause of most people's worry, Americans' worry over money, is debt. You know what the Bible says about debt. Owe no man anything except what? Love. He doesn't want us in debt. Why doesn't God want us in debt? He doesn't want us in bondage. Because when we're in bondage, we're a poor witness to the unsaved world. He wants us out of debt. He wants us free, right? Crown Ministries says there are 2,400 scriptures on money and possessions, and 600 scriptures on love. So God knows that we have a lot of interest in money and possessions. We're almost obsessed with it. He knows that. 2,400 scriptures talks about it. I remember when my wife first invited me to go to Crown Ministries 20 years ago now, as a financial planner, I said, what do I need to go there for? I know it all. I'm a financial planner. She says, do you know what God says about money, Mike? I said, no. So let's go find out. That was my introduction to Crown. Crown Ministry says that God has a role to play in our finances and we have a role. God's role is pretty simple. You know what it is? He'll take care of our needs if we're obedient to Him. Period. Full stop. You know what our role is? Our role is to be faithful stewards of the money and possessions He's entrusted to us. The whole Crown Ministries 12 weeks was based on how to become a faithful steward of the money that God has entrusted to us. Large or small, doesn't matter. So we're going to start by getting out of debt, at least credit card debt. It's all we've addressed so far. So now let's go to step 4. So now we have $1,000. You know where your money's going. You've got $1,000 in the bank. You're getting rid of your credit cards debt. You've gotten rid of it. We're just assuming step by step. This may take you a year to do. It may take you 2 years to do. It may take you 6 months. Just depends on how serious you are. okay? So step 4 now is taking into account that $1,000 is nice, but it's not enough for a reserve. You all know that. Every financial advisor in the United States will tell you, and every book you read on financial planning will tell you should have a minimum of 3 months living expenses in the bank. Earning nothing, lazy money. It's insurance against emergencies so that you don't have to go into what? The debt. That's the insurance policy you need to prevent you from increasing the debt you already have. So now we're going to increase, remember, you've gotten rid of your credit cards. Step 3 or whatever it was, 3. You've gotten rid of that, so that frees up money, right, in your paycheck. So now you're going to take every additional dollar that you can, and you're going to start building up to 3 times your monthly expenses. Well, how much are my monthly expenses, Mike? Well, you're going to know that because you've done your budget already. So if your expenses, monthly expenses are $3,000, $5,000, multiply it by 3, and that's the amount you need to have for step 4. So think about it. I want you to think as we go along here that you've actually accomplished these things. You know where your money's going. You've made decisions where you want it to go. You're in control now of that money. You're not letting the money control you. You're starting to feel pretty good about that. Now you've accumulated $1,000 that's sitting in the bank where you only had 100 before. Feeling even a little better. Now you also realize, wait a minute, I have also now paid off my credit cards. May have taken you quite a while to do it, but you've focused like a laser beam on that step to get rid of the credit cards. And only carry one. I used to carry 4 or 5. Carry one. I have one for my company and one for me. And if I use the card, and I do because I get rewards for using it, but I don't charge any more than I can pay off each month. It takes discipline, yes. But it really pays off. So now what you're going to do, think about it. You've got $3,000 sitting in the bank, no credit card debt. You know where your money's going. You're feeling pretty good. Let's go on to the next step. Next step is we're going to tackle any other debt you have. I call it consumer debt. That would be things like car debt. Any debt that you have that's not tax deductible is considered to be consumer debt. Your mortgage, if you have one, that interest is tax deductible. Car debt is not. Interest on a car loan is not. Interest on credit cards is not. That's all consumer debt. So now what we're going to do, since you've paid off your credit cards, you have money in the bank, $3,000 sitting there. We're now going to tackle getting rid of your car payments or any other debt that you have. You can use any one of these strategies. Keep in mind, this 5-cent approach, this nickel approach, works pretty good. You can see how you could accumulate quite a bit of money over a relatively short period of time, 1 year, $3,000 plus, by just employing that strategy. I'm going to try to get through all 10 steps well before our time limit so we have time for questions. So I'm going to race through these a little bit. Let's go to the next step. So now you're out of debt, right? You have $3,000 sitting in the bank. You know where your money's going, and you're debt-free, with the exception of your mortgage if you have a mortgage. Okay? We haven't talked about the mortgage debt yet. But everything else you've paid off. Okay? So now what you're going to do is start putting even more money aside than that 20%. Remember in the beginning, if you did the 50-30-20, you're already putting 20% aside. But now you've freed up your paycheck from quite a bit of money, right? Because you've paid off all your debts. So now you're going to start thinking about maybe putting even more money into your 401k if you have one. More money into your mutual funds and start to accumulate even more money. I can tell you from being in this business for 40 years that the saddest thing in the world for me to observe is when people come to me, referred to me when they're 60, 65 years old, they don't have a pot. And I said, Mike, I want to retire in 5 years. We do a financial plan, and I said, you're going to have to work till you're 100. I want you to start now so that you won't ever be in that situation or close to it. And I'm sure many of you are already well ahead of me on this, and you probably are doing quite well. And if so, praise the Lord. Congratulations. But so many people are not. And it's not their fault necessarily. Life comes along and all kinds of things can interfere with accumulating the kind of money you need to accumulate. You know that, I know that. But it may also be just because you've never been taught and never been motivated to do it. Only you know which category you fall into. Okay, so I'm going to teach you two little mathematical rules that you can impress your friends with next time you're at a party. Sound like you really know what you're talking about. It's called the rule of 72 and the rule of 115. How many of you have heard or know about both? Okay. Rule of 72. You divide the interest rate that you're currently getting on your investments into the number 72. So let's say you're getting, I don't know, 5% average returns on your mutual funds or wherever you have it invested. Or let's make it easy math, 6%. 6 into 72 is what? 12? 6 into 72 is 12. That 12 is the number of years it's going to take to double your money. So if you start off with $1,000, and you have it earning 5%, 6%, in 12 years you'll have $2,000. So the rule of 72 says simply take, on the bottom line, take the number you're earning, the percent you're earning on your investment, divide it into 72. The result is the number of years it takes to double your money. The rule of 115 works pretty much the same way. Divide what you're getting on your interest, on your investments into 115, and the result is the number of years it takes to triple your money. Just a handy little. The average annual return on stocks since 1926 has been what? The S&P 500. 10.5%. Average annual return. So if you're able to get an average annual return of 10% into 72, you're doubling your money how many years? In how many years? 7.2 years. 10 into 72? 7.2 years. Okay? So we're going to be putting money away now, maybe 25%, 30% into long-term savings. I've read here 15% of income. You're already doing 20. I wrote this many years ago, but I'd like you to get up to 25% ultimately putting money away. Step 7. How many of you have children, young children? Yeah. And you hope they go to college, right? My son never did. He was learning disabled and dyslexic and hyperactive, and he tried as hard as he could to get through school, got through high school, but never was able to really make it to college. He tried. I'm hoping that's different for your kids. if you have children, I'm suggesting, rather than putting, say, 20, 25% into, say, long-term savings after you've, in the previous step, but put at least 5% or so into a 529 college education plan for your kids. Each one of these I could spend a full hour on and expand on, explaining how to do it and drilling down. I purposely gave you my email and my phone number for no cost or obligation. This is a ministry for me here. Please feel free to contact me, and I'll be more than happy to help in any way I can without any cost or obligation. You don't have to become a client. Okay? Now, so we're going to put some money away if you've got kids. And now you're going to buy a house. And you say, well, I already have a house. Oh, wait a minute. Let me go back here. Even before we buy a house, what we're going to do is we're now going to do a little estate planning. Up to this point, I've been talking about how you can do good for yourself, right? Save money for this, get out of debt with that. It's all for you. How about the people you love and care about if something happens to you, if you graduate to heaven early? You can leave people behind that you care about. That's what estate planning is all about. Taking care of people you love, if you're not there to do it. So if you're married with children, certainly you need a will. You need, whether you have children or not, you need things like advance directives, medical directives, financial directives. These, by the way, there's a great website that will really educate you on all of this. It's called LegalZoom. Have you heard of that? They advertise it a lot on television. LegalZoom.com. It's put together by attorneys, and they have discounted prices for things like wills and medical directives and a full education on what each of them mean. So I would recommend that you take a look at this and educate yourself a little bit. One of these days I'm going to do a class on estate planning and actually bring an elder law attorney in here and an estate planning attorney with me. But for now, LegalZoom.com, check it out. Mike Emerson, who most of you probably know in the church here, attended this class years ago, and he got his will put together through LegalZoom. So you could talk to Mike if you want. Life insurance. How do I know if I need life insurance? Well, it's pretty simple. If something happened to you yesterday, is there going to be anyone that's hurt financially that you care about? There's going to be a lot of people who are hurt emotionally when you pass. But how about financially? If there isn't anyone that's going to be hurt financially, meaning you have enough assets really that they would inherit to take care of burial and so on, then you don't need any life insurance. Doesn't make any sense to pay premiums for something you don't need. But if you do your figure and you say, well, gee, I only have $10,000 in my 401k and I got $5,000 here sitting in the bank. I pass away, my wife's going to need to raise these kids and pay for the mortgage and all this kind of stuff, or my husband, vice versa, right? Then you need some life insurance. And that should always be term insurance. You should rent your insurance. Don't let any insurance agent talk you into buying permanent insurance like whole life or universal life, or it's 5 times as expensive as term. And they'll make a strong case for why you should do it. And yes, there are a couple of situations where perhaps it makes sense to have some form of permanent life insurance. But I'm saying for the vast majority of Americans, term insurance is perfect. It's inexpensive. Why is it inexpensive? You can buy a 20-year term for pennies on the dollar. Why? Because you're going to outlive that 20 years. So the statistics say. But only the Lord knows it, who is actually going to outlive it. But the life insurance actuaries have figured out most people are going to outlive that 20 years, so we're going to let them have this life insurance for pennies. But of course, we don't know when the Lord's going to call us. So term insurance would be the right amount to have. How do you figure out how much you need? Well, if you're the breadwinner and you're earning, I don't know, $50,000 a year, and you pass, and you're spending every bit of that money as a couple, you better have enough life insurance to replace that $50,000 each and every year. So let's say you want to replace that $50,000 for just 10 years. That's $500,000, right, of life insurance. 20 years would be double that. So it's going to be a lot of term insurance, depending on your age. But as I mentioned, if you're healthy, you'll be able to get it for quite a low rate. The quickquote.com will actually give you the rates. You just put a couple of numbers in there and a little bit about your age, and they'll give you some quotes. Okay, now we're on to step number 9. Many of you already have a home. I realize that. But again, I'm assuming we're starting from scratch here. My son bought his unaffordable home before he'd done step 2. No matter what I told him. Maybe you have some kids that don't always listen to you. Doug certainly didn't. Fortunately, he survived it, and he's doing okay, but it was a struggle. So buy an affordable home. And then, of course, finally what we're going to do is we're going to pay off that mortgage as well. What we're really talking about here is just a journey. I've taken you on a 10-step journey of 1,000 miles, it seems like, but it begins with a single step, and that single step is first starting with that budget. 80-20, 50-30-20, or itemized budget starts there. Single step. Get your 1,000 in the bank. Pay off the debts. Build your reserve up to $3,000. Start putting money away for yourself, even more than you started with. Get it up to 25-30% if you can. If you have kids, all right, take some of that and put it towards, I'd say, a tax-free 529 college plan so that the earnings grow tax-free. That's the 10 steps. Questions? We have time, don't we? It's almost 10 off. What time we finish? It's supposed to be at what time? We started at 7? Yeah, so we have almost 15 minutes. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
As far as paying off your mortgage, what if you have, like I have a 2.75 FHA assumable, so I could sell my house very easily by somebody being able to assume that low interest rate. Should I still pay it off, which would lose that?
No, I think every case is different. I'm just in generality saying, ideally, in an ideal world, we want to be debt-free. But certainly there are certain circumstances where it might mean to do something a little bit different. I don't have any problem with having tax-deductible debt, really. I really don't think, not many of us can pay cash for a house when we first start, right? So we have to go into debt for that. To buy a car, most of us have to go into debt to do that. I think what the Lord wants us to do is get rid of that debt as quickly as we can, fully realizing we do have to go into debt to purchase certain things. Yeah?
A follow-up to that, I was told, and I don't know if you know this is true, that almost every mortgage has a clause in there somewhere that if they feel your circumstances have changed and like a different job or a demotion or something like that they can call that mortgage even if you have not missed a payment. Is that true?
I don't know that. I'm not aware of that. So I'm not saying it's not true. I just don't know. But you might want to check that with your mortgage holder, make sure, see if that's true. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
In terms of paying off debt, when it comes to school loans,
Speak up just a little so they can hear you, please.
When it comes to school loans, what you said earlier, you pay the highest interest rate first, so that, is that the same you would be doing for school loans, that you pick the particular loan that's at the highest?
Yeah, there's two ways. Good question. The question is, if we have different, whether it's credit cards or whether it's student loan or any other debts that you have some debt that has higher interest rates than other, right? There are two approaches to it. Dave Ramsey would say just the opposite of what I had up here. Dave Ramsey would say, do you know? You haven't been through the Ramsey course? Where Dave Ramsey says, pay off the smallest debt first. So let's say you have a $3,000 debt here, a $2,000 debt here, and a $1,000 debt here, but this $1,000 has the highest interest rate. He says, pay this off first, even though it has the lowest interest rate. Pay it off first, and you want to pay it off first. He says because it gives you some encouragement to know that you've at least paid something off, and that will motivate you to start paying off the higher interest rate ones with a higher balance. And who's to say that that's not right? I'm suggesting, strictly from a financial standpoint, it makes sense to pay off the highest interest rate debt one first. But if it makes you feel good to pay off, the smaller debt first and get rid of it, and you go, man, I'm going to have an ice cream cone and celebrate, and then I'm going to tackle the next one. Just don't put the ice cream cone on a credit card. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
With the inflation eating up our dollar a little bit now, saving money in U.S. dollars, I don't know, I know our 401k is earning a negative 9% right now. So I don't know, do you think that could be changing in terms of where you would save your money?
By far the best way to save money is that 401k plan. Yes, it's down in 2022. But over the last 10 years, it's up about almost 500, 600% from where, say, 10 years ago. Way up, just coming off a bull market, right? And so 2022, yeah, we're down 9%, 13%, the S&P 500 in 2022. But that should be good news for you. You know why? Because every dollar you're putting into that 401k now, every dollar, you're buying proportionally more shares of those good mutual funds that you're investing in. Why? Because the shares prices are down right now, right? So every dollar you put in there, you're buying proportionally more shares. And the person who wins the investment race at the end of the rainbow, end of when you're ready to retire, is the person that's accumulated the most shares of quality stocks and times the sale of those shares when the market is up and not down. So when my clients, when I get a client, I preach to them right from the beginning, look, the market's going to go up and down. If you're not comfortable with that, let's keep the money in the bank. But if we're going to try to make reasonable returns to outpace inflation over the long term, you're going to have to take some moderate risk. That means getting out of the bank and putting some of your money in the financial market, stocks and bonds. But just be aware when you do that, some quarters you're going to open your statement and you're going to say, whoa, why did I do this? Because the dollar value is going to go down. But keep this in mind, even though the dollar amount that you see has dropped from 50,000 to, let's say, 40,000, you're not happy, you haven't lost one share. You haven't lost one share. You've lost share value, and that's why it's dropped from 50 to 40,000. But you haven't lost any shares. And as long as you don't sell, you haven't lost a dime. And I preach that. And they'll call me, Mike, you told me, didn't you tell me years ago that I shouldn't panic when my 401k is down? Yeah, remind me why I shouldn't panic. And so I'll tell them. So the goal is to continue putting as much money as you can. The best savings vehicle for we Americans today is an IRA, a 401k, be it a Roth or be it just a regular traditional. Why? Because of the tax advantages. Uncle Sam is giving us a huge tax advantage for putting money away. For every dollar, ma'am, that you're putting, and you probably know this, into your 401k, Uncle Sam is giving you about 30 cents back because it's a tax deductible dollar. So if you don't put that dollar into it, Uncle Sam keeps the 30 cents. Plus your company's putting some extra money in perhaps too. It's all free money. Think in terms of shares and not share the actual dollar amount. You're accumulating shares. That's the key to remember. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I realize that these principles have been in place for decades.
Yes.
For decades.
Yes.
But there are certain things, even Pastor Gary has confirmed, that are happening now that have never happened before. Like we're going to a digital currency. We're possibly going into a much larger recession, probably even depression. 60% of the dollars printed in history of the Federal Reserve have happened this past year. So there are some things that are unprecedented. Has your plan or recommendations changed at all because of the events of the last couple years?
Not one iota. And let me tell you why. Every one of my clients, we put together a financial plan and we anticipate the best we can. Black swan events, we call them, like we're going through now. It's almost like a perfect storm, isn't it? It really is. But we anticipate that. And that's what every one of you should be doing if you haven't done it, is putting together a financial plan and then stress test it, S-T-R-E-S-S, stress test the plan. Well, what if we have a major recession in 5 years after I start this? How's that going to affect my plan? What if inflation averages 8% instead of your assumed 3%, Mike? How does that affect my plan? We stress test the plan. And if, by putting stress on the plan fails, you know, it shows that you're not going to be able to achieve your goals, then we have to do something different, right? We have to do something different. We have to reduce expenses. We have to earn more income. We have to maybe shift your investments around into things like TIPS, Treasury inflation protected bonds, different types of investments to try to help you reach those goals if those major swan events occur. So there's no easy answer to this. I can't tell you how many times clients have said, but Mike, this time is different. This time is different. And I go back over history and show them how many times people have said that when world wars break out, when major events take place. This time it's different. And it always feels different. And yes, there are many things this time that have never occurred before. I agree. I have faith, as long as I have faith in the American economy and American business and capitalism, and I do, and then I'm not going to make any changes. I'm not going to tell this lady or anybody else not to invest in good, strong, blue chip companies that I believe will weather the storm like they have since the beginning of our country. Then I just trust the Lord for the outcome. That's all I can do. Yes, ma'am.
For the budget part, the 50, 30, 20,
Yeah.
what part is giving, like, where does the giving fit in?
That's going to be up to you. We're living in the age of grace, and so we're not legally obligated to tithe. Not legal, not spiritually legal. But if you consider to be that a must, then I would put that into the 50% category. That's what I do. I would include my tithe in the 50% because I consider that a need as opposed to a want. But for many people, it's more of a want. And a lot of people will say, and who am I to argue? Look, I've got these debts, and if I give a full 10%, then I'm not going to be able to pay these debts. Oh yeah, but they'll say, but the Lord will provide. Well, hopefully he will. But he wasn't happy that you got into these debts in the first place. So I don't preach. I'm not a pastor. All I know is what the Bible says, that if you can't be a joyous giver, that the Lord's not happy with your money. So what I like to do is say, okay, when I'm doing my 50-30-20, if I was doing that, I would be saying, what is the most important thing to me that should go into this 50% category? Not only my living expenses, but tithing is that critical to me, it goes here. Hope that helps.
And then my other question was, so say if you're building your emergency fund,
Yeah.
can you still, like, you know, go into, put money aside in retirement and complete college, or you have to be completely done with emergency fund first?
I'm sorry, I lost it. You faded on me on the last.
Like, should you be completely done with your emergency fund before you invest in retirement and your kids' college, or?
Yes, yeah, you're right. Good question. I recommend that you do these sequentially the best you can. If you have money if your company is matching a 401k and you have the opportunity to put money in a 401k, and they say they're going to match up to 3% of your salary, I'd say go ahead and put that 3% in, even though you haven't paid off your debt, because you don't want to give up free money. But if you don't have access to that, what I would be doing is saying, look, let's take this a step at a time. This is what Dave Ramsey says. Take it a step at a time, budget, get the 1,000 in the bank, pay off the debts, and then start putting, if you're doing the 50-30-20 though, you're already putting money aside, right? 20%? The goal should be to start putting money aside as soon as you can. I realize that many of you in the room aren't going to be able to do the 50-30-20 plan tomorrow, but it should be a goal. You can get there if you work at it. It takes discipline and self-denial. And those are both very difficult. That's why most of us never, ever become financially free. Because most of us, including myself, find it very difficult to always discipline myself and to deny myself. But you read that book, Millionaires Next Door, that's what they did. They decided what they were going to do is put up with the short-term pain for long-term gain. That's what it takes. There's no shortcuts. You know that without my telling you that. Well, we're at 8 o'clock, so thank you all for coming. Don't hesitate to contact me if you'd like to talk, okay? No cost or obligation. Thank you for coming.